All right, today we're going to be looking at substitution. So the idea with substitution. All right, so with substitution, the idea is we need to have either an x equals or a y equals in order to use substitution. Some of you on the test, you were just circling like a 3x and putting it in the other equation. So as we look at number 4, the very top equation already has y equals. Y is already all by itself. Number 4, when you're on your test and you see a question like number 4 where you already have a y by itself or an x by itself, that question is going to be an easy substitution question for you. Because on your test you get your pick on what method you use, but you have to use each method at least once. So I take what y equals. We called it a blob. We circled it. Wherever I have a y, I can replace it, aka substitute, x plus 3. It has to go in for what it equals. So this is a y equals, so it has to go in for the y. I can't put it in for the x, or I can't just put in, some of you put things in like for the 11 on your test. It has to go in for the y. It has to go in what it equals. Okay? So what that will look like then, the second equation, the 3x is going to stay. The plus sign is going to stay. But instead of y, we're putting in what we have circled, which is x plus 3. By putting in that x plus 3, I no longer have a y to worry about in the equation. I have all x's. If we have all of the same variable in the equation, we can solve that. We did a bunch of solving like that last trimester. The equal sign still stays and the 11 still stays. So the only difference is instead of y, we have x plus 3. Everything else stays the same. Now from there, I just have to solve my equation. Combine like terms. If I just want to combine like terms that are on the same side of the equation, I keep the signs the same. So this is 3x plus 1x. So we just get 4x plus 3 equals 11. From there, guys, we just have a two-step equation to solve. Subtract our 3. And then divide by 4. So the new idea, guys, the new part, different from things we did last trimester, is that idea of needing to substitute in the x plus 3 for the y. Once we do the actual substituting part, now that equation is just something we solve. We've got all x's, we use what we know about equation solving, we roll from there. Now with the graphing yesterday, we got an ordered pair each time. We had an x and a y. We still need that here even though we're doing substitution. So I already have x. So I take what x equals, and we talked about going back to the blob. We go back to the circle. That's going to be my easier choice for finding the other variable, which in this case is my y. So we have y equals, and instead of the x, I'm going to put a 2. X equals 2, so any place I see an x, I can put a 2. So my y equals 5. We really should write our solution as an ordered pair. If you didn't on your test, and if you don't, if you're retaking, I'm not going to take points off. If you've got your x and your y, I'm going to be happy with that. Writing it as an ordered pair just makes it your answer just a little better, is all. All right, so number 4, if you see something like number 4 on the test, you've got just a y equals already by itself, or you have an x equals by itself, that question is saying, hey, use substitution. That's the easy choice. Now in question number 5, though, in question number 5, we don't have an x equals or a y equals. We don't have that. So I cannot just circle and say, oh, well, I'm just going to take 2y and throw it in somewhere. I can't do that. So I have to make the easy choice. I need to create an x equals or a y equals. As you look at the equations in number 5, what's going to be the easy choice to get by itself? Which variable?
X.
The x where?
Up top.
Up top. The x up top is going to be the easy choice to get by itself because there's just a 1 in front of it. You want to look for a variable that is either just a plain x or a plain y, or maybe one that has a negative sign in front of it. If it has a number there, like a -2, a 4, a -3, those are going to take more work to solve for. We're going to have to eventually divide, and then when we divide, we might get some ugly fractions. So let's take that first equation, x minus 2y equals -3, and let's solve for the x. So let's get the x by itself. In order to get x by itself, I need to take that minus 2y and move it to the other side. How am I going to do that? Add it, yeah. Lots of adds on that, awesome. All right, so when we do that, we have x equals. On the right side, the -3 does not have a y, so all I can do is write -3 plus 2y. That's all I can do at that point. So now what we have, oops, sorry guys, it jumped, hang on, sorry. There we go. All right, so now we have an x equals. We have an x equals. That was our goal. We either need a y equals or x equals before we can substitute. I have an x all by itself. I've got the x equals. So I'm going to circle what x equals, and I'm going to find an x to put it in for. We rewrote the top equation, so we've got to substitute in for x in the second equation. When that happens, I still need the 4 that's in front of the x. Then I take the piece of what x equals, I take that expression, that -3 plus 2y minus 3y equals 8. So just take a look. The 4 is still there. Instead of x, we put our blob, we put our circled expression. We still have a minus, we still have a 3y, we still have the equals, we still have the 8. So the only part of that equation that's changed is I no longer have the x. Instead, I have that expression that we circled, that x equals. When I put that expression in, I no longer have x's and y's in my equation, I just have y's. If I'm down to just y's, I can solve that using methods you guys already knew how to do before we even started this year. So let's go ahead and distribute. -12 plus 8y minus 3y equals 8. Again, those like terms, that's what was really getting some of you. Some of you got really frustrated with substitution, not because you didn't understand how to substitute in for x or y, but when it came to combining like terms, we were doing some sign changing. If they're on the same side and I just want to put them together, I leave the signs alone. So this is 8y minus 3y. I don't do any sign changing.
I have to get 12.
So I have 8y minus 3y is 5y equals 8. So again, if they're like terms, so the 8y and the -3y, they both have y's. They're like terms. Keep the signs the same. Now from here, let's move our -12 over by adding. 5y equals 20. Divide by our 5. Y equals 4. Once we have y, remember we have to also find our x. The first one always takes the most work. To either get the x or y, whichever one you get first, that always takes the most work. After that, to make finding the other variable easier, always go back to our blob, our circle, if you will. Go back to what you circled. We have x equals -3 plus 2. And then instead of y, we now know our y is 4. We now know y is 4. So we do a little bit of computation. If you want to just throw that in your calculator, that's fine with me. And we get our x is 5. So the big thing I want to make sure that I really am clear on today and really refresh you on today. Oh, not the graphing. Sorry guys, being a little touchy today. There we go. You have to have, let me grab a highlighter real quick here. You have to have a y equals or an x equals before you can substitute. In question 4, we had it. We had y equals, we were ready to substitute right away. In question 5, we had to do a little rearranging of that first equation to get x by itself. I just want to do one more problem with you and then give you some time to practice and ask your questions if you didn't get them answered with these 3. In number 6, if I ask you to do substitution, I know it might not be the easiest choice, but I want to make sure I thoroughly review substitution today. In number 6, we do not have an x equals or a y equals. We don't have that. So we have to create it. We have to do some rearranging. Which variable is going to be easiest to get by itself? The y in which equation? The first one. The y in the first equation is going to be easiest to get by itself because all that's in front of it is a -1. Eventually we'll have to divide by the -1, but dividing by -1, all that does is change some signs. It doesn't make any fractions or anything ugly like that. So let's take the top equation and let's get the y by itself. So let's take the top equation and let's get the y by itself. In order to do that, I have to take positive 2x and move it over to the other side. How am I going to move positive 2x? What do I need to do? Subtract it. It's positive. It's positive, so adding it isn't going to do me a lot of good. On that left side, I went ahead and I put a -1 in there so we don't forget about it. This was the type of question that, again, some of you got frustrated with in substitution because you didn't get the y all the way by itself. You didn't completely solve for it because there is that -1 in front of it. So to undo that -1, that's -1 times y. To undo multiplying, we have to divide. When you divide, though, you have to make sure you divide every little thing by -1. Dividing by -1, it's not going to create any fractions. All that does is turn the -y positive. It turns -11 positive and -2x positive. That's all it does. So now we have y equals. Now we have y equals. Now we're ready to circle. Now we're ready to substitute. This was the top equation, so we have to substitute it into the bottom one. You have to pay attention. Some of you with this, you kind of got in the habit of, oh, it just always goes in for y. Not always. Our middle example, we had an x equals, so we substitute in for x. You don't always have to get y by itself. That's not a big deal. All right, so from here, the 3x is still going to be there. The minus and the 6 are still going to be there. But instead of the y, we're going to have 11 plus 2x. And then we still have the equals 6. So you have to be very, very careful when you substitute and make sure you're substituting in for what that expression equals. If it's a y equals, it's got to go in for y. If it's x equals, we've got to put it in for x. Be careful on this one when you distribute. We need to distribute, a negative 6. So this becomes negative 66, a negative 12x, and we still equal 6. Be very careful. It's a negative 6 that you are distributing. When you combine your like terms, even though these are split apart, they have the negative 66 in the middle. Even though they're split apart, I still don't change their signs. They're on the same side of the equation. I just combine them. So I have a 3x and a negative 12x. I don't change the signs. That's a negative 9x. Minus 66 equals 6. So just be careful when you're solving. On this one, you have to distribute a negative 6. Combining like terms, it's a 3x and a negative 12. No sign changes happen. Add our 66 to both sides. Negative 9x is equal to 72. Divide, divide. This equals, our x equals a negative 8. Even double check, guys, even using a calculator if you need to. For some of you, when you took the test the first time, you lost, and it was just small points, but you lost points when you had something like this and you put a positive 8 down. So just be careful. That's why we want to make sure we always check our solutions also. So we have our x. We have our x. Go back to, if I can sneak that line in there, go back to the circle. I know somebody like Miss Guy, that's kind of cheesy to call it the blob, then call it the circle. The circle blob, the oval, the whatever works for you. And we get that our y equals, we've got negative 5. So x is negative 8, and y is negative 5. So just be very sure, the pieces that I've highlighted up there, be very sure you have a y equals or an x equals before you circle things and substitute. We can't circle and substitute until we have an x or y all by themselves, like what I have highlighted up there for you.